Hi, everybody. So I'm a music manager, so Bo, I just want to give you props for your song. That was pretty good. So Stacy, it's such a treat to be here with you. I have to tell you, Stacy Smith is responsible for really waking up a lot of people in the music business and Hollywood and film and TV, because she's the founder of the Annenberg Inclusion Initiative at USC, and her team, led by Stacy, they put out these reports every year that kind of tell us where we are as women in our industry. And I work in the music business. I've been John Legend's manager for 20 years and his film and TV producing partner. And I work with a number of artists, and there's not a lot of women at the top in the music business. So when we read Stacy's reports and we see that very few women are being represented in songwriting, producing, in positions of leadership, in Grammy Awards, in Billboard charts, it's a real wake-up call to all of us, and it makes me think, wow, we have so far to go. And I'm so appreciative of the work that you do, because it's the truth, it's the data, it's facts, and we need to know that to know where we stand. So Stacy, will you tell us a little bit about Annenberg Inclusion Initiative and kind of how you decide what to study and what kind of results you're finding?
Thanks, Ty. It's great to be here. We pride ourselves at the Annenberg Inclusion Initiative of being the leading global think tank on studying issues of inclusion in entertainment. And what we've found over the years is really simple. When you put women in positions of authority, things change, right? The women in this room know that when they're given influence, they are given power, things change. And so one of my favorite statistics comes out of some of the work that we do in film. And we know if you have a woman director behind the camera, you have more women leads and co-leads, you have more women speaking characters, you have more women, and this is very important to me, over 40 and above on screen. It might resonate with some of you out there, just a few, maybe. You have more women working behind the camera, above the line, and in crew positions. And so when you ask, what do we decide to do at the initiative, it's really look at issues of power. And when you put historically marginalized folks in positions of power, how it can accelerate and advance change quickly. And so we got to know each other because we took aim at the music business to really understand the role of women. And that's another place that's not doing too great, that has had a little bit of recent success in moving the numbers, but that's how we got acquainted. So people come to us, we read what's going on, and then we decide, how can we help? How can we use our statistical knowledge, our advocacy, our awareness to create change?
So when Stacy and I met, it was years ago, right before the Grammy Awards. And the study came out, and it was this kind of bombshell to find out that only 2% of the top songs in music were produced by women.
2%.
2%. And only 13% of those songs were written by women.
13%. I'm just here for extra. I need to know that.
So when you think about that, and actually there's this other statistic, over the last 12 years, a quarter of the most popular songs, the songs that make the most money, that you stream everywhere, were written by only 12 men.
12 men. 12 men. And Swedes. They're mostly Swedes.
They're mostly Swedish.
Swedes, yeah. We love Sweden, but I'm just punctuating.
Yeah, but when you think about that, those are the songs, those are the lyrics, those are the emotions, those are the feelings, that's the representation that we're listening to. And it's largely written by men. And so it's, we were flabbergasted when we saw these reports, and then the Grammys happened. And the head of the Recording Academy at the time had been sort of the head of it for decades, 30 years. And it was, he was being asked by the press, what do you think about these atrocious numbers that women are so underrepresented in every element of the music business? And his response was, and some of you may have seen this, it was years ago, and I get it, he was tired. But his response was, you know, I think that women would find that if they just stepped up.
Stepped up. Sorry.
Yeah, no.
We've got a thing now.
So good, I love it. And that really was this wake-up call for so many of us to acknowledge and recognize that it wasn't about women not stepping up. It was that the music business is really hard place for women to succeed and to thrive. Going all the way to the recording studio,
right,
where pretty much any woman you've ever talked to who's been invited into a recording studio session to write a song or produce a song has dealt with multiple instances of sexual harassment, sexual assault. It's not a safe place. It's like the casting couch in film
right,
and TV. So I was one of 10 women in the business, in the music business, and there's not many of us, that asked the then recording academy head to step down from his post, because it was very clear that the men who had been in power in a lot of these places were not even understanding the basic facts and data and why it was that women have not had parity and are not represented in so much of our creative world. Mm-hmm. And Stacy was the catalyst for that. So and ever since, I wait for the reports. Now, here's the interesting thing. She does this in film, she does this for TV, you do it for sports, lots of different...
We want to go into sports, we just haven't had the right...
Okay, yeah. It takes a lot of time and money, and you really have to analyze the data. But sometimes, here's what happens. So she comes out with the report cards and shows everybody how far we still have to go, or if we've slipped from the year before. We'll make a little bit of progress, and then all of a sudden it's back down, and you're like, gosh, women are not getting included in these creative processes. They're not in power, they're not in the room. And what's really interesting is the industry often wants to not get the information, they want to cover it up. So this year at the Grammys, there was a lot of, I gave the keynote at the Recording Academy, and there was a lot of, it's the year of the woman. Mm-hmm.
Year of the woman, just get my part going.
So what did we do, Stacy?
We decided to write an op-ed.
We did.
And kind of set the story straight. Is it the year of the woman or not? And before we dive into that, I just want to share one really important, I think, number or statistic that kind of gets at this issue of inequality and years of inequality. And I'm not talking 100 years of inequality. I'm talking about the recent past of inequality. So we did this study looking at films, but we're going to talk about music in a second, but it makes the point. From 2007 to 2018, 2019, we looked at like the top 1,800 films. And what we found, which was so fascinating, where we're going and why it's so important to look at this in music, is if you look at how much support was given to white men when they are centered in a story, and you compare that to the support women of color are given in the same time frame, about 16-ish years, maybe 15-ish years, there's a 15 billion with a B dollar difference. 15 billion. And what's important about that means 15 billion in reparations are due to women of color. Because we found that it's the lack, right, absolutely, it's the lack of executive support that's blocking people like Gugu Mbatha-Raw, right, from rising to talent, right, Zoe Saldana. It's not their talent, it's the access and opportunity. And so there's a lot of shutting down rather than saying, let me open up the checkbook and make sure you're paid equally to your white male counterpart for the talent that you have. And so we decided to kind of look at the top 100 songs over, the last year, you and I in this op-ed, and take a deeper dive to really understand how are women supporting women and what might be a good way to change this quickly.
Right. Because it's all about action, right? How do we change this quickly? And we wrote this op-ed, and it wasn't, I don't think, provocative in any way. No. We were basically saying, if you just add 2 women into the songwriting process or into the producing process, and especially if you're one of, because people called it the Year of the Woman because Taylor Swift was so massive and up for so many awards.
Right.
And Beyoncé also had a really big year. So it seemed like the Year of the Woman from a certain perspective of top level, like album of the year type. But if you look at every other piece of the business, it was not the Year of the Woman. So we just said, okay, well, if we just ask people to add 2 women to the mix, like just, I work with John Legend, I'll be like, hey, John, we should add some women into the recording studio. He's like, absolutely, I want to work with, at least half, if not more, let's add women to the mix. No problem, no pushback from the artist. But that's me as a woman manager, one of the only women managers kind of suggesting it with John Legend, who's amazing. But there are many managers out there that would never even recommend it. And in fact, when we wrote this op-ed, we got a lot of pushback. We got a lot of pushback from women in power in the business. The few that are at the top, keep in mind, they're often there because they've been in the business for 30 years. And they got that kind of power, being in the business that was extremely male-dominated, and the tagline was sex, drugs, and rock and roll. And that means generally that they know where the bodies are buried, and they probably helped bury them, right? So you have women who get into positions of power, but then there's so much resistance to actually uncovering the truth of what's going on in these situations. Why is it this way? Can we have a bad report card and talk about it? Can we have conflict? And so I was really surprised to find out. I mean, I'm really an entrepreneur, independent musician, manager. I manage a lot of people outside of music as well, and my company is about 40 people. But I've never worked at the top of a record label or the head of a publishing company, so I've never had to play in those big business spaces where I had to, if I think about the women in power in the music business, and again, there's very, very few, but it's like they're the coaches of the football team, but they're not the owners, right? And they've been there for 30 years, so they've been compromising every step of the way. And that's not to diminish where they are. But what's fascinating is that you start bringing the truth. And they called you upset about this op-ed.
Well, I think what's really important is that the solutions for change are really easy, right? And I think that inclusion doesn't happen organically, as we know. You have to be intentional. And our work shows really clearly that if women go into the recording studio, they're not only going to be sexualized, they're not only going to be objectified, it may not only be a place that's not safe for them, but that their work is undermined. And we found that there's 25 songs where you have a female artist, but you don't have a female songwriter in those rooms.
Yeah.
And do you know what would happen if you simply added 2 female songwriters, right? To those 25 songs, we could potentially be at parity for the first time ever on the music charts in like 6 or 7 years.
Right.
First time ever. And so I think that really thinking strategically about simple solutions, sometimes it's this is too good to be true, right? This is just too good to be true. Yeah. But it requires effort to say, I mean, you have a roster of people that you can point to say, this is who we should put in, or this is who you should try.
Yeah.
I think as entrepreneurs, I think as executives, being flexible, being nimble, who's not talking in the room, seeking out those people that traditionally aren't in places of power. All of our research has suggested, no, the talent is there. It is simply access and opportunity. And it's really hard because I'm a college professor. I believe in a growth mindset. I believe the people in the music business think, oh, there's only like 10 or 15 guys who can do X, fill in the blank. It's the same thing with directors in Hollywood. There's only so many. That's complete, what I like to call adventures in missing the point. It doesn't exist. What exists is I'm on a college campus where there's talent everywhere. Our job is to see that talent and bring them into those rooms safely, working with other women. And I think sometimes we get siloed and we lose the ability to really perspective take, think broadly, and know that talent is literally everywhere. Because you can't tell me those 10 to 12 guys that are songwriters on all the songs, that they're it.
Yeah, no.
No.
And so I think you're right. It is actually simpler than we think. It's just that when you're in power, you have to then bring people up with you, open the doors. If you're a famous artist, Taylor Swift, we're talking to you, or John Legend, invite women into the room, because a lot of those people are inviting 12 men in to write the song, and they're just not even thinking about maybe I need to think about who I'm bringing in. And so as a leader, at least in my industry, I'm hiring women, but it wasn't enough to just hire women and to run the business and run things the way that the men ran it. You have to get to that position of power. And for me, at least, it was like, okay, I have all this power now. How am I going to do this differently? And in my industry, if you're a manager, people were working 24/7. People were like, oh, you can't be a manager, you'll never see your kids. And I was like, well, how do we stop that? How do we actually load balance? How do we hire women who are mothers and also support one another? And so my company is called Friends at Work, we really put in this matriarchal kind of perspective of how do we do this well and live our best lives. Because no one should get into these positions of power but then have to subjugate each other or subjugate ourselves. And we can't just get there and then go, okay, now I'm going to run it in the way that Scooter Braun or Guy Arcieri or anybody. You have to actually rewrite the rules. And it's radical and it's weird. But it's like, that's the only way out, I think.
100%. Right? And asking every time you go somewhere to bring two people with you, that's a very small ask. Yeah. If every time we inhabit space, there are two more women, two non-binary folks, two trans folks that are with us all the time. Importantly, women of color, women over 40, right? People who have been shut out, not because of their talent, but because of access. It's a really hard road for me to walk down, that is a difficult ask for anyone, particularly the people in this room, particularly the spaces that we get to participate in. I know your team is female driven, right? Mine is as well. Anybody should be able to do this, from the CEO, top spot, all the way down to the mailroom. Always bringing people with you. We all know it, but that's the quickest route to change the data, because it will then multiply, right? The Annenberg Inclusion Initiative started with 12 people. Now we're thousands globally, and I run into my students everywhere, and they know the message and they value inclusion. If you ever just want to be humbled and reveal how much we don't know, hang out with Gen Z. They'll tell you exactly what to value, but that's what I mean. How do we bring folks along at every age, at every aspect of our lives, and to challenge people who say it can't be done with, let me show you exactly how it's done. Because that's how we're gonna change these numbers that are facing us.
So Stacy, in the last couple of minutes, one of the themes we were talking about was how do you cultivate deep connection with one another? And when I was sort of in my entrepreneurial growth phase of power, it was pretty traumatizing, honestly. I wish someone had told me, if you're gonna start a company and try to play with the boys in this business, you need to make sure that you have weekly therapy, which has helped a lot. But as I approach 50, I just turned 49 on Sunday, I've been thinking a lot about how do we heal together? How do we connect deeply? And part of my process has been about getting vulnerable, really being open and honest and admitting mistakes, and not trying to tear anybody down or be torn down by my own inner demons. So how, when we get there, given all that women have to go through to get to the top, if you get to the top, that's a hard, hard road. And it can be very lonely. How do we connect with one another so that we support each other, so that we're healing together? How do we make deep connection in and among our industries a value point that we?
Well, I think it's so hard because we're in a Western individualistic culture, right? And I was fortunate enough to interview Lily Gladstone at USC just a couple of days ago. And her focus, the Blackfeet Nation's focus is really about communal influence. When you succeed, I succeed. What you need, what is mine is yours, right? And I'm putting those words on my interpretation of what was said, but we really have to think about this as a shared matrilineal communal space, and that when you prosper, when you get ahead and you bring people with you, that is part of my success, and vice versa. So often people are threatened, and being threatened leads to scarcity of resources. There's not scarce resources. It leads to fear. Fear leads to exclusion. Exclusion leads to prejudice and discrimination. If we can think about how we can work together and rise together, like our friendship has over the years now, all of us will be in a better place. But we have to counter those individualistic tendencies.
Yes. Amen. Well, I encourage everyone here, I know this is a group that is bonding and getting together, but I encourage everybody to open up about kind of where we're getting stuck, where somebody isn't really able to break through, why, and admit some of those harder parts of like this whole process, and you and I do that, we call each other, we're like, wait, why isn't this, how do we,
right.
And it's really been so rewarding, so thank you for your friendship and for your leadership and
Thanks.
all of the information that you share with us, and thank you so much.
Thank you.
See you soon.